Okay, so in section 10.3 we are going to graph quadratics in factored form. Below you will see the list of steps for graphing in factored form, and the first one, obviously, is to factor if necessary. Step 2 is to find the x-intercepts. This means to solve for x. Remember, we set each of the factors equal to 0 and solve. Okay, so let's go ahead and start number 1, and then we'll go through the steps here and explain a little bit more in detail. So factor if necessary, that is already done for us because we have 2 sets of parentheses. Now it says find the x-intercepts. That means that we are solving for x. That means y has to be 0, and we set each of the factors equal to 0. So x minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 1 equals 0. Solve that. So for the first one, we're going to add 3 to both sides, and we get x equals 3. For the second one, we're going to subtract 1 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 1. That means that our x-intercepts are 3, 0, and negative 1, 0. If we plot those on our graph, we've got negative 1, 0, and 3, 0. Remember, the axis of symmetry is going to cut this in half. Okay, it goes through the vertex, but let's find the halfway point first. So this is halfway between the x-intercepts. Another word for halfway between would be the average. So what is halfway between 3 and negative 1? Well, you could probably eyeball it. So in this problem, you can probably see that the axis of symmetry is going to be on 1. And if you found the average between 3 and negative 1, 3 plus negative 1 over 2, because you're just adding and summing 2 numbers and dividing by 2, you would see that you get 1. Remember, that is a vertical line, so it's x equals some number, and in this case it's 1, so axis of symmetry is x equals 1. So notice, for x-intercepts we use points or coordinates. For the axis of symmetry, we have an equation of a line. Now, remember, the axis of symmetry goes through the vertex, so we need to find the vertex, which is the next step. Because it's on the axis of symmetry, we know that x has to be 1, but we have to figure out what y is going to be. So what we're going to do is, just like using an xy chart, we're going to plug in 1 for x. If we plug in 1 for x, let me switch colors here, we get y equals 1 minus 3 times 1 plus 1. So I plugged it in for both x values. So we get y equals 1 minus 3 is negative 2, and 1 plus 1 is positive 2. So it's order of operations. We're going to do our parentheses first, and then we're going to multiply, and we see that we get y equals negative 4. So again, it's just like filling in an xy chart. Our vertex is at 1, negative 4. It should be on your axis of symmetry. If it's not, you've done something wrong. Now, you should be able to ask yourself, should this be opening up or down? Well, because it's positive out front, it should be opening up. And it looks like it is going to after we connect the dots here. But we do have something else to find. We want to find the, let's see, what color am I going to do here? Let's do green. We are going to find the y-intercept. Now, anything that is on the y-intercept has a value of 0 for x. So if we plug in 0 for x, we get 0 minus 3 and 0 plus 1. So y equals 0 minus 3 is negative 3, 0 plus 1 is 1, so we get negative 3. Plot that on our coordinate plane here, and because that is an axis of symmetry, that red line there, we can reflect that over to get another point on the other side, so that when we connect the dots, we have a really smooth curve for our parabola. Step 6 says to state the domain and range, and we will do that in class tomorrow. Okay, So let's look at number 2. Again, this one should be opening up because the number in front is positive. There's an implied positive 1 right there. So we are going to first find the x-intercepts. How do we do that? We have to factor and solve. This is already factored, so we will put 0 in for y and solve. That means set each factor equal to 0 and solve those equations. So here we're going to subtract 3 from both sides, we get negative 3. Here we're going to add 3 to both sides and get positive 3. So our x-intercepts are negative 3, 0 and positive 3, 0. Plot those. And now we want to find the axis of symmetry. Remember, the axis of symmetry cuts it exactly in half. Well, the average of positive 3 and negative 3 is 0. That is a vertical line, so the equation of the line is x equals 0. We know that the vertex is on the axis of symmetry, so it also has to have 0 for the x portion of it because it tells us x equals 0. So we have to figure out what y is. So let's go ahead and plug in 0 for x. We get y equals 3 times negative 3, or negative 9. Plot that. Looks like we're just off the graph here. And it's actually on the y-intercept, or on the y-axis. Because it's on our axis of symmetry, it goes through 0. That is also the y-axis, so it is also the y-intercept. Connect the dots. Nice smooth curve. And there's our parabola. You are responsible for one checkpoint. It is already factored for you. So first you will begin with solving to find the x-intercepts.